Hi, Max Brantley with the Arkansas Times, Thursday, July 30th. News from Arkansas. The Governor Hutchinson's Common Core Task Force met today and perfected its recommendations on what should be done about the Common Core school curriculum. This is the nationally developed set of standards that is supposed to provide uniform educational standards across the country. It's become controversial in some circles. The outcome was about what we expected. The Common Core Task Force recommended, well, more review of Common Core. Sent it back to the Education Department. This is somewhat ironic, as Benji Hardy has noted in writing for us, because after all, these were developed by the Education Department in years of study in the first place. Tim Griffin, who was deputized by the governor to carry out the governor's wishes on this, said, oh, but in the end it will be the governor's decision. Well, of course, they're going to make some changes around the edge. This is largely a cosmetic exercise. We're going to have centralized standards in place. They're not going to be much different than where they started in the first place. We'll probably come up with a new name for Arkansas's versions of the standards. But Benji Hardy points out one good thing is done. It seems to have tamped down some of the reactionary unhappiness that broke out over Common Core. Changing the test, for one thing, took a lot of steam out of the argument. So Governor Hutchinson, though, while he might not have really accomplished very much, he's accomplished something in simply putting out the brush fire, and there's something to be said for that. News elsewhere. In Pine Bluff, the Jefferson County Jail reports that some 80 inmates, unhappy about some contraband discoveries and loss of privileges, went on what some have called a riot. They certainly ran wild for a while. They did a lot of damage to the jail. Nobody was hurt, and order was restored. From Eureka Springs, I'm happy to report that Arkansas's favorite iconoclastic city just did a bang-up job on The Daily Show last night. You can go to the Daily Show website, you can go to arkansasblog.com and find a link to the report. It's a really great story that illustrates what a wonderful place Eureka Springs can be, tolerant, different, and diverse. The city council member Joyce Zeller did such a great job. I think she ought to run for governor. She was confident, smart, self-assured, friendly, tolerant, just everything you'd want a city leader to be. The Oklahoma preacher who led opposition to the civil rights ordinance for gay people in Eureka Springs didn't do quite so well, I have to say. It's a funny episode. I recommend you take a look. Rochelle, who's been executive director of the Razorback Foundation for 2 years, is going to leave in a couple of months. That's the foundation through which most of the big money flows to support University of Arkansas athletics. It goes through that organization so that the operations can largely be kept secret from the public. Whether this is just a better private opportunity for Rochelle or if it signals a further consolidation of athletic director Jeff Long's power over the Razorback structure, and he's been credited for doing a good job at that, remains to be seen. Matava, which is a new technology company that's set up in Conway in January, said it hoped to create 60 jobs, announced today that things are going so well in creating apps and other web development projects that it needs 100 more people, triple what they originally thought they'd need. So that's some good tech news. Governor Hutchinson naturally took credit, said this is about his emphasis on coding instruction in Arkansas schools. A couple of things I'd like for you to take a look at on the Arkansas blog if you have time. One is about my column this week about the Arkansas Supreme Court. New information on how the votes split over a period of time before the Supreme Court ultimately did nothing on the same-sex marriage case, with one Justice, Courtney Goodson, being on both sides of the issue before it was all over with. Also some comments on Rhonda Wood's unusual and injudicious behavior and her ties to some unsavory financial contacts in the course of getting her seat on the court. I think it's things you need to know to understand how the Supreme Court operates. I wrote too today about Planned Parenthood and great controversy, perhaps the most damaging of its history, because of undercover videos obtained through misrepresentations by an anti-abortion group that has some Planned Parenthood officials talking about the use of fetal tissue. There's a disagreement about whether they were talking about legal payments for transportation or illegal payments for tissues and organs. There's yet to be any evidence produced of any illegal sales happening. That hasn't stopped anti-abortion forces from using this as an argument to kill Planned Parenthood entirely, particularly the federal money it receives, not for abortion, but for family planning services, contraceptive services, cancer screening, sexually transmitted disease tests, and those sorts of good things. It's really stirred up the opponents here. State Representative Bob Ballinger has gone on the internet today and called everybody at Planned Parenthood criminals in a Twitter account. Well, I don't think anybody at Planned Parenthood of Arkansas is a criminal. We don't engage in any tissue research here. There are no clinical abortions performed here. More than 90% of the work is pure health services for men and women, and much of it the kind of health services work that prevents abortions by giving people safe, effective, and comprehensive sex education and contraception. If you don't get pregnant pregnant, you don't need an abortion. What I fear is that this will lead eventually to a reduction of available contraceptive services, and in the end, more abortions and more back alley abortions. But I think Planned Parenthood does good work. It perhaps has some questions to answer about some of its activities, but I don't think we should lose sight of the great amount of good they've done over the years. And you know, tissue research itself, it makes people squeamish, but it's important. Tissue research is why we have a polio vaccine, for one. Organ donation and tissue research is a fact of life in the medical community. Without it, we'd really be in a bad shape. So I urge you to take a look at all the facts before you reach your final conclusions on that hot topic. I'm Max Brantley. I'll be back tomorrow.